right. Well, here we go, Ollie. We're back into it. There's no weather disasters recently, so we sort of touch wood as we go. And maybe do we talk about method of sale? That's probably a pretty long conversation, but do we touch on that? Do we make a start on that? What do you think?
Well, in this market, I think how to sell your property and the various ways you can do it, I think is rather important. The various ways we know about are auctions, by negotiation, by price negotiable, by tender, and by deadline treaty, which I don't understand, and by set sale. So maybe you can just cover the set sale and deadline treaty for us.
So you're going to throw those two back to me. Pretty easy. If you roll back, we would both remember a period of time where you could sell your residential home by tender. And then what the agents were doing was they were manipulating the tender process. So they were selling prior as such. And then there was a bit of a concern through the industry or the one of the bodies at that stage saying, well, it's not the intent to tender. Structure of tender is you have time to do your due diligence. You do that before the due date. You know it's still available and you can put your best offer in. But the agents were selling prior. So then they manipulated it and they said, okay, we'll do an open tender or a closed tender.
So I see.
Closed tender was traditional, would be commercial veins through it. And open was we could sell prior. And then the industry started moving away from that. And funny enough, actually, just as a point of interest on that, at that stage, the tender document from the Real Estate Institute was pretty interesting. It set out all the rules for the vendor. The vendor must do this and must do this and must do this. And then sort of down at about number 20 or something, it said, and the vendor can do anything they like. So it negated all the previous clauses. It was a bit of a nonsense. So then everybody moves away from that. They don't want to call it tender. They don't want to get trapped on it. And then they invent these things that most agents don't believe, which is they just created some sort of deadline and said, turn up on that stage on that day at that time, and we'll look at your offers. So I think, Ollie, for most people, if you thought back and said it's some sort of tender, but we're too scared to call it a tender.
Well, folks, I'm no further ahead, but not at all. Well, anyway, I thought we might talk about in more detail how the auction process.
Great.
From the point of the seller. Okay. Believe me, the auction for the seller is a heart-stopping business. It is heart-stopping. It's one of the worst stresses you can go through. So choose it and good luck. I think divorce and death are just above it, but there we are. So the first thing you do if you decide that you want to put your property up for auction, you sit down with the agent or agency and they'll present you with some documents. You correct me if I got this wrong, I'm sure I'm right. Present you with some documents. On that document will be the name and address, of course, and there will be the date of the auction somewhere that you decide, perhaps 4 or 5 weeks ahead. And then the next thing there maybe would be the reserve price. That's the price you want under which you will not sell. Now, you don't have to decide on the reserve straight away. You can decide later. Yeah,
good point. I'll touch on that. But you keep going.
Yeah, but you have to make a conclusion in the end. Also, there's a commission presented to you. The agent will present a formula for commission. It's too complicated to say it, but there's a formula. Now remember this, folks. You can negotiate a commission, right? You don't like that, do you? You can negotiate. Up, of course.
Okay. I'm happy with that.
Up and down, and you can negotiate the commission, and that's fine. You won't get much off, but something's better than nothing. Now, you want to also write out the list of the chattels very, very carefully and make sure what you're talking about. But you don't want to leave grandma's favourite rug on the floor. You want to put down everything that goes with the place, and you want to know the difference between chattels and fixtures. Generally, fixtures are things that are screwed down, like stoves and that sort of thing. And chattels are things that can move around. But the big arguments break out about it. So write down exactly in that what you're going to leave behind.
Blanket.
That's right. Now, what can also happen is now you've got to decide about open homes. Now, you can do two ways. You can have it by appointment. You can say, I don't want open homes. A person who's interested in the property sees the advertisement, will ring up and make an appointment to go through the house. It's fine. That's if you don't care. Open homes are most favourite way of doing it. And open homes are where people can have a good gander at your place, and most of them are tie kickers. And they, remember this: they're going to open your drawers, they're going to go under your bed, they're going to go into the bathroom, they're going to the kitchen. Most of them are tie kickers, And so put everything valuable away, lock it away.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
And you just have to put up with it. It's heart-stopping stuff. It really is. It's revolting. It usually is twice a week, weekends, maybe during the week, and.
Yeah, it can be 3 times a week.
Can be 3 times a week, yeah. Yep. And you've got to put up with it and put up with it, these sort of people. But the important thing is somebody in that crowd of tie kickers may be genuinely interested, and their friends may hear about it. So it does work that way. So you have to brace yourself for that. Now, something else may happen before the auction date comes. Somebody may come along and give you a pre-auction offer. Whoopie-doo. This is somebody can't be bothered waiting for the auction date. They come along with an offer that may or may not be acceptable sometime before the auction date. At that point, you can sit down and look at it, and you accept it or reject it. You can have a tiny weenie of negotiation, not supposed to. And then if you accept that offer, the auction's brought forward to a couple of days later, maybe 3 days later, depending.
Yep.
And everybody that's interested in the places will be told, and then you have a quick auction. You've sold it now, but somebody else may come along and make a bid over. And then, of course, the first bidder is cheesed off because they thought they bought it. So a fight breaks out, but never mind, you've sold it and that's it.
A bidding war.
Yeah, it should happen more often. And but be prepared for a pre-auction offer does happen.
Yep.
Then you want to look carefully at the document you're signing and send it to the lawyer if you're not sure. The agent has sole agency on the property. And after the auction is over, and perhaps it hasn't sold, the agent has sole agency for some time after, maybe a month, maybe 6 weeks. I've seen one where the agent tied them up for 6 months. Not a good idea. So there we go. And you can negotiate the commission, by the way, at the very end, and you can make a change reserve at the very end. And sometimes even a change in the commission can make a deal work or not work.
Yeah,
Simple as that.
Bit of negotiating.
That's the basic. You may add a few more, but that's a heart-stopping way an auction works.
I thought I'm an auctioneer. I thought it was a pleasant experience. So people smiling from ear to ear, looking quite relaxed.
Oh yeah, but everybody, look, folks. Wayne is the best auctioneer, most definitely the best auctioneer in the whole world. Did I get that right? Yeah, I got that right. Yeah. That's how
Can they see me slipping the money across?
That's how you wrote it out for me.
Word for word, you got it.
Yes,
I appreciate that. Great points. Let's roll backwards. And you've reminded me today, very, very typical on your agencies that they'll be 90 days. And in fact, under REA, if it's beyond 90 days, the client can cancel. But there was a period there where I would look at an agency from another company and they had locked somebody up for a ridiculous amount of time, which was crazy. So hopefully that's been tidied up. I like the opens. Yeah, security at the opens. I like the vendor to be there at the very beginning. We do a quick check, make sure everything's safe. And I like the vendor to be there at the end of the open. So, the opens are typically probably 45 minutes in the Auckland market today. So if the vendor's back at that stage, we know we've handed the house back and it's all theirs. Pre-auction offers, yep, absolutely. Normally see them almost a 50-50 call in that half of them would be rejected. A vendor would go, no, hey, look, ridiculous. And the other half, a vendor goes, thank God that's happened, and they grab it. And then I think what a vendor needs to appreciate is you're on the market the minute we announce that, and if there's no further bids, you've sold, but you have secured it. So I think a lot of guidance there. Chattels, this is something where over the years, we've got this massive list of where agents have gone wrong. Recording an air conditioning unit or a heat pump, and there wasn't one. And then the buyer on settlement goes, well, no, that was in it, and I'd like one, please. Yep. So that sort of thing. So chattels, the detail of chattels, in my mind, as opposed to fixtures, chattels, included, excluded. This one is excluded. I'm taking grandma's rug. This one's included. And then with appliances or anything that's functioning, we say included in working or included in not working. Or It might be, hey, look, we've had the dishwasher for a number of years now, so no warranty on it.
But I've seen buyers come along and ask for something extra they've seen in the property.
Yeah. Yep.
A sculpture in the garden,
Yeah.
or painting, and they've just said, look, I'll buy the place if you leave this beautiful painting by Gauguin or by Renoir with the property. And a fight breaks out on that point.
Yep.
Yeah, so everything is negotiable.
We had an auction in Oreki, little unit. We're inside. We've got an amazing price. The owner looks quite happy with it. He's chuffed. I think it was a little too beddy. And the people wanted the old sort of deck furniture was sitting out there, and it was pretty well at the end of its life. So they added that as a chattel in the negotiation. They pay a little bit more, but throw in that deck furniture. It suits the ambience of the place. And I thought, oh, well, that's a walk in the park. It wasn't. The owner had made it himself, which had created the ambience of it. Didn't quite look like it'd come from a shop. Yeah. And it was a deal breaker. He's like, no way in the world. Right. And that was going with him. So you've got to be quite careful on the chattels, don't you?
Another thing to think about, usually auctions require the settlement of the property after the fall of the hammer, whenever it's sold, to be settled within 30 days. That's common. Mm-hmm. But you can go to the auctioneer if you're interested in the property. Go to the auctioneer before and say, look, I can't sell in 30 days, only 60 days. And you tell the auctioneer that, so he will take your bids, you will take their bids, knowing that the settlement date will be further out.
Yeah.
Now, another thing I've come across is I didn't know this was possible, but I've seen conditional offers being put on a property that's under auction.
Yep.
So there's an auction coming up, but there's conditional offer made during that period, and it's bubbling along underneath there. So you think about it, folks, you can do this now, and we may be able to get to the unconditional by the auction date. If not, and somebody buys it, too bad. So this wasn't a practice years ago, but now you can put in this conditional offer, and it'd be subject only to the property not selling at the auction. Right?
It's very interesting. Let me just touch on the variations, because I think that's one the market needs to understand. If you're a buyer sitting there, so typically it's set on the vendor's terms. We'll settle in, so it's 30 days and it'll be a 10% deposit. But as a buyer, if you need a variation, you can do a confidential variation. It might be 5%. It might be some mixture of deposit over a period of time, and the settlement could change. So I think, I know, in fact, the majority of auctions I call, there would be a variation in place. So I'd announce what's on the document, but I'd acknowledge if you have a variation agreed by the owner, that stands. So I think that's right. The one you've just touched on there is pretty interesting, the conditional buyers. And I hear quite often that people will say to me, auction locks out conditional buyers. Well, you've just identified one way it doesn't. So there, I think it's got to be the vendor's decision, as long as we're doing it with integrity. The vendor's decision might be, hey, look, I've got no other interest ticking along, so I will sign that conditional offer for a period of days, and we'll see if it's either going to be unconditional or not prior to the auction. Vendors got the ability under 2.6 in the auction contract, withdraw and sell at any stage, so they can do that. So I think you're right, but it's not usual. But I'll tell you what is becoming, certainly in our group, is becoming quite common, is that we will have the conditional parties lined up on the same time period. So if auction's 5 o'clock on a Wednesday, the cash buyers can be there at 5 o'clock, and we're telling conditional parties, if the cash buyers don't do it at 5:05, we will turn to conditional parties. We're actually getting some parties saying, I won't even miss the beat. They'll have a written offer ready for the vendor before that auction even starts. So I think that's a good outcome for the vendor, and I think it's a good outcome for the buyers also. They get to be able to put their foot forward and demonstrate to the vendor where they sit. So you're quite a adjustment there.
Now, I'm speaking on behalf of the seller at this point. Beware when it comes to the auction itself. Bidding starts low usually and goes up and up. And if and when the bidding gets to a point where it's nearly right, the auctioneer is likely to take you, the seller, into a room on the side with the buyer, and the whole audience who's waiting there just twiddle their fingers, twiddle their thumbs for perhaps up to half an hour. Nothing's happening. And a negotiation, you may be locked in a negotiation in a side room with the buyer, pressure being put on you, you putting pressure back, lawyers, agents, everything happening. And then after up to half an hour maybe, you and you sweating like mad, the agents sweating like mad, the buyers, everybody cut at each other's throats. You finally come out and you either announce that the property is now sold, and are there any other bids? And if it's not, or it's not sold, as the case may be. This is another heart-stopping time when that goes on, and a terrible bore for people sitting in the audience if there are other properties coming up. So just be prepared for that, folks.
It can be quite a long delay. Look, we've had auctions that have gone an hour, so you're right, up to an hour. I think it comes down to the agency, and this is where, if you were a seller, I think you would go, when you're determining, do I sell by auction? What method of sale am I going to choose, and which agency? You'd have a look at the variance between the agencies. And you've made a really good point there. Immediately on the pause, where do the agents head? Do they head to the buyer to get more money, or do they head to the seller to get the seller down? And if they're heading to the seller to get the seller down and you're selling, I don't think you want to be, I don't think that's a great practice for you. I think the agents should be heading immediately to the buyer and negotiating the buyer up. I think that's their job. Fiduciary responsibility to the vendor, duty of care responsibility to the buyer. But great point. You could determine which way to go just by watching performance.
Better than that, I'll take your job. One of the other things I've seen happen, getting back to...
You'll need a wig.
I have got 2 mops at home, that'll do. What I've seen at auction, what's happened is there's a dispute arises, or a mistake or an error arises. Settle down. Settle down. A mistake or 2 bids may arise. What you may see as you're the seller, you may see somebody stand up and say, I object to the bid. I object to the bidding. And at that point, correct me if I'm wrong, the auctioneer can say, right, there's an objection out there, a dispute out there, we'll go back to the first bid that we know and start all over again. And there's more heart-stopping time, believe me, because there's a fight breaking. It should happen, it's not so bad. But these sort of things you've got to be prepared for. I tell you what, auction is a nightmare, but you've got to do it. Not for the auctioneer, not for him. He's laughing all the way to the bank. But for you, the seller, it's tough going, but it's got to be done.
And I think that's a good point. And I think the agency needs to appreciate that they've got to protect the seller so the seller can make good decisions. And it's not doing your reserve early in the piece, it's doing your reserve a couple of days before the auction happens. Over that, prior to that, you've got all the feedback from those open homes where they've identified the person who's interested, and we find out sort of where they sit. With withdrawing the bid, pretty interesting. It was only a number of years ago. Now the auctioneers, they have an auctioneers contest. That would really flip you if you had to turn up and sit through that, I think, Ollie.
Oh. No, piece of cake.
But what they started doing, and they hadn't done it for years, was they actually withdrew bids. Somebody would say, actually, I'll tell you what, I pull my bid. And that was to demonstrate to auctioneers that, yes, that can happen. So until the fall of a hammer, a bid can be withdrawn. So if you're sitting at the final point, you've got to be pretty sharp as you do this. So it's not adding the numbers up. Sometimes you've got to subtract.
Maybe we should go to the Dutch auction system where there's only one bid.
Interesting.
Start at the high price, drop down. Nobody sees anything until, bang, it's sold with one bid. I usually do it for fish, but I think probably now it might be a good
that would be terrifying.
That would be more stopping.
and I love it. Years ago, I used to hear people who used to say, oh, this is like a Dutch auction. So you don't even know how the Dutch auction works if you think this is like a Dutch auction. But yeah, that's a
one bit gets
amazing way of doing it. Amazing way.
Yeah.
Communication at the auction, terribly important. I'll give you something. When I was a young auctioneer, I started in Tauranga. They sent me to Rotorua because they didn't want me to embarrass myself in front of the local population. So I got to learn the trade over in Rotorua. And I was over there negotiating one day, and the vendor was in a side room, buyer was out on the auction floor. We'd gone back and forth, and it was at a point where it wasn't acceptable. So my understanding would be that, look, we'll set the property aside, maybe put a price on it, and we'll keep working. back and forth with the vendor. I go back into the room. The vendor has been on the phone to her husband, and she goes, "Oh, look, change of instructions. Just put it on the market," which in our language means announce we're on the market and we're about to sell.
That's right.
So I was like, wow, okay. At this price, put it on the market. She goes, yep, absolutely. Okay. So wandered off to the auctioneer.
Let's see what's happening.
Yeah. And a couple of meters away from the auctioneer, I thought, doesn't feel right. I think she's got this wrong. So I had to turn around and hike back. And I said, put it on the market means we're about to announce we're selling and we sell at this level. And her terminology was, no, just put it back and market it again.
Yeah.
So that would have been quite a famous mistake if I'd made it. I'm pretty pleased I didn't get the last couple of steps up to Gil Beadle at that stage, who was the auctioneer.
Yeah, well, the mistakes happen, but I think generally you can't profit from making a mistake. If a mistake happens, somebody makes a
Genuine.
bid,
Yep.
a genuine mistake,
Yep.
you can't really profit from it. So
Yep.
you put the thing up for auction again. There are excited people. I went to an auction once where there was just the bidders there, but there was one bidder only. He bid every bid. He bid against himself. On and on and on and on and on. He bid, and we were trying to tell the auctioneer, look, this is nuts, slow down, slow down. And he kept on bidding 3 times the price, 4 times the price. And the auctioneer kept on taking it. But the guy was not well.
Yeah. Yep.
Not well. But that's a shame.
I've only seen that at charity auctions, and that's normally because they've been
Well,
drinking
charities
heavily. So, and normally the charity is quite happy with that. That's part of the deal.
I've got 3 suitcases and several bottles of wine home where I've paid about $500,000 each. I know the feeling. At charity auctions.
Look, I think we've covered a fair bit in there around auctions.
Yeah. We haven't even touched by negotiation.
But yep.
We haven't touched that. We haven't touched how you sell it when it's has to be conditional, or how that works from the seller's point of view,
Yep.
from the buyer's point of view, and what sort of conditions come up. We'll do that next time.
If we open those up on other ones, that's great. Here's one for you as we sort of go into the close. When you're selling, what's your favourite method of sale?
Auction I hate for the same reason everybody hates it. It's heart stopping.
Yep.
But I've only been really involved in selling commercial property of late, which is done very quietly, and usually just by offer, by negotiation or something. Very rarely by fixed price.
Yep.
Most houses, I think, I would guess 90% of them are sold by auction. I guess some are sold privately. In a sense, the agent passes it around and it never hits the market.
Oh, yeah. Off market, the agents would call it. Yep.
Off market. In a hot market, that's quite good. In a quiet market. But some people just don't want the thing advertised. They don't want people coming to the place. They just want it off market. They're in no hurry. I know of a property now that's been on the market, off market, for a couple of years. And I don't think they ever sell it.
Yep.
So the prices are dropping while it's sitting there. So you can do that. There's all sorts of ways. We touched on tender, which is another way some properties are done if there's complications. Bear in mind that when you are selling, make sure you get the right name of the seller, your name on the property. You may be sharing it with some other people. It may be in a trust. It may be you. And you don't want a fight breaking out later on if you're only representing somebody else or you're a part owner. Get that right from the beginning and get that sort out where the money goes before. Especially if there's a group of you owning the property, sort out clearly with your lawyer who gets what if the property sells and who's liable for what.
Which, unfortunately, in a matrimonial situation, the distribution may not be 50-50. So, that's beyond the agent, not visible to the agent, and rightly so. But, the distribution as that comes through, something to consider,
Divorce auctions are it's a big problem in many cases in divorce auctions. I've seen one party wants to sell and the other party doesn't. They want to stay in the house. So you have a yin-yang sort of situation. You got one party saying, yes, sell at this price. The other party saying, I'm not selling at all. But it has to be sold. And whoever's out in the street is the first to be, that's the keenest, isn't it, for her?
Dead right. We see that, unfortunately, quite often.
Yeah.
If I flip hats now, instead of selling, if you're a buyer, what's your favourite method of sale? If
you're a buyer,
do you love turning up to those auctions?
I just like places that up. Buy negotiation is the best because you're not under pressure. It comes to an auction, you're perhaps bidding against 10 other people and bidding against crazies as well. But So if I had the money and an auction was coming up, I'd make a pre-auction offer just to clear the way and just see what happens. I may be rejected, then I know that's it. I'm wasting my time trying to buy a $5 million house for $3.09. Not going to work. Okay? So pre-auction offer is the way. I just can't be bothered seeing through it. But I have done it for other people lots of times. In the days when I was doing that sort of thing, acting as an agent for the buyer.
Yep.
Which is, interesting situation because they're pulling at your shoulder and auctioneer's pulling it and you're the meat in the middle.
You're standing in the middle. Yeah. All right, well, fantastic. Maybe we talk about that next time. We made a lot of progress this week. We've covered off auctions. There's a lot of detail in there. Personally, I'll have to think about this, but I've moved away from an explosion in a mattress factory description of this to I've got 2 mops at home, so could be quite similar.
Don't take it personally. You're still handsome. Don't worry about it.
Thank you. I love the way you read your lines.
That's right. I got it right, didn't I? Yeah, that's okay.
Excellent, Olly. Thanks for your time and
you were late. You were late coming here. You were delayed by a mirror.
That's how we keep morale up in a very tough market with real estate agents. Just put more mirrors up in the office.
That's right.
See you guys. Thank you.